about program delivery through mobile phones. So what specifically does that mean? Well, okay, so, all right, so we'll come back to that in a minute. So I'm going to talk a little about just kind of what the mobile world is looking like. There are lots and lots of people who have mobile phones and are using them, including low-income potential legal aid recipients. So it is an important thing for most every organization, human service organizations especially, to be thinking about. And then we'll talk about 3 different ways to think about using mobile phones, using them to provide information, to have conversations with constituents, and then to support staff in the field. Just a quick introduction of myself, and then we have 3 others with us who are also going to be helping to present. I am Laura Quinn. I am the Executive Director of Idealware. Idealware, just for those of you who haven't heard of us, we are a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to providing information to help other nonprofits make smart software decisions, certainly by way of trainings like this, among other things. And we're lucky to have with us today 3 different speakers, including Kate Lado. Kate, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am the founder and strategist at Powered Pursuits, a small consulting firm working with nonprofits on technology strategy.
Terrific. And we have Liz Keith with Pro Bono Net.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Keith. I'm the LawHelp Program Manager at Pro Bono Net based in San Francisco.
Fabulous. And Vince Morris.
Hi, I'm Vince Morris. I'm the Director of Arkansas Legal Services Partnership and Arkansas Pro Bono Partnership, and I work with Justice Technology a whole bunch.
Terrific. And so you'll hear not only some kind of context setting from us as to what people in the nonprofit space are doing, but some great case studies from the folks who we have with us on the phone. So with that, let's get underway. So why should you think about mobile at all? So as of February 2012, so, you know, probably, and so not very long ago, but a reasonable time ago in terms of these kind of trends, 87% of all American adults have a cell phone. And many of those people have smartphones. So 66% of all people 18 to 29, 34%, 50 to 64, have smartphones. And you'll see that this doesn't actually differ that much by household income, by educational attainment. People are somewhat more likely to have a smartphone, but still lots and lots of people have a phone and a smartphone regardless of demographic. And they're not just using them to make phone calls. Of the people who have a smartphone, they are using them to check their email, to go onto websites, to do texts. They're doing lots and lots of things with them. Anybody who's working with younger folks as part of your audience who haven't been around the texting mania of like a high school, college, or just out of college type age group, there are a substantial demographics who are sending hundreds of text messages a day. So it's definitely an area that's worth paying attention to. And legal clients are using, the legal aid clients are using them as well. So here's some survey results of actual clients of 2 different organizations, so Georgia and Montana. In both of them, 82% had cell phones. So in Montana, 63% of them had smartphones. And here's, for Georgia, what they had access to. 93% had text messaging. 40% had email access. So there's a lot going on that really impacts legal aid organizations. Kate, you want to just talk a little bit about what you've seen and what this means to you?
I think one of the things that I've seen as I've been reading news articles and other pieces are the fact that for many low-income people that they often choose to go with having a cell phone or a smartphone so that they get sort of the mixed internet access and phone usage instead of buying separate packages. That particularly in sort of among people who are homeless, that often a cell phone is their way of staying connected, and that they find in those cases that text messaging is often cheaper than using voice services, because you're able to do things fairly quickly instead of having to go through the niceties of sort of, hi, how are you, what you need, potentially waiting on hold and using other minutes. Here in Baltimore, that it is very common to see people having cell phones, even to the point that there are programs that particularly you see in low-income neighborhoods where there are people sort of handing out cell phones based on whether people are eligible for government benefits or not under special programs. So things so mobile phones are very well used in low-income populations.
Absolutely. Liz, Vince, any additional thoughts here as to why mobile is important for legal aid organizations to be thinking about?
Well, I think one of the observations that I'll talk about a little bit later on in a context like Montana is that in rural settings, people may be away from their desktop computer or work computer for long periods of time if they're on the road or just on the go a lot. And so in rural settings, I think there's the potential for mobile to really provide a level of access to online information and support that's especially important for people who are just, not at their desk or not at a computer or may not even have one at home in the first place.
Absolutely. Fabulous. So with that kind of context as why we might care, let us delve into what things you might do in order to, think about the fact that there is a cell phone in almost every pocket these days. What are the types of ways that you can think about providing services? And in particular, we're going to talk first about providing information. So the first thing to think about when you're thinking about anything mobile is how your website looks on a phone. So it doesn't really matter what else you're going to do if your website is pretty useless as soon as they go there. So if they get a text message from you and they try to access your website and your website can't be used mobily, that's going to be a downside. You could potentially do some programs, so you could do something with text messaging, you could maybe do a mobile app, but certainly for most organizations, you're going to want to think about your website as the core. And a good way just simply to answer this question, how your website looks on a phone, as there's a site, there's a lot of these sites, but one particular one is called a Mobile Phone Emulator. So you just mobilephoneemulator.com. You can go to that URL to see, in fact, what your website looks like on a phone. And you can see here, for instance, here's the Feeding America website. There's not much here on the upper left-hand corner of a phone. This would either appear like this on some phones, or on some phones it would appear incredibly tiny. It would show the entire homepage, but it would be too tiny to read. So given that you'd want it to be friendly, what do you do about it? So you can there's two different approaches here for a mobile-friendly site. You can think through just making sure your current site is rational to use on a mobile phone. So for instance, here's the Heifer site, which is which has in the top left corner some information that is reasonable. So at least it looks, so it has our work, it has get involved, it has some bit of the website that you can see on a mobile phone. So thinking through, okay, what's on the top left of my website that people are going to be able to see? Or at least if they, so that's one possibility, that what they'll see on a phone. The other possibility is they'll see the entirety of this website, but very tiny. In that case, things like big buttons like what they have here, so our work, get involved, visit, give, are potentially things that you could make out even on a very tiny, so if it was all shrunk down and it was very tiny. So that's one approach, is to basically say, all right, we have one website, we're going to tailor it. You could also tailor it by way of what's called responsive design, meaning you could actually have your website show up differently if someone is on a mobile phone. So this is generally a site redesign from a graphic design perspective to say we're going to use a different template, which is then going to look one way if you open it up in a regular browser, and it's going to, instead of being 3 columns, it's now going to be, let's say, 1 column, and it's going to have the picture shrunk down and all of this. So it's going to do stuff to make it appear better on a phone. So that's a responsive design option. Or you could simply build a straightforward website using normal website technologies that's particularly for mobile phones. So here we have the UJA Federation, and it's simply it's built just like any other website, except it's particularly narrow. So it's designed to be narrow and to scroll vertically rather than having people that scroll horizontally. So that's a third option. So they're approximately in order of expense. So you would, making your site mobile friendly is going to be probably the cheapest option, followed by building a responsive template for your site, depending on how big your site it is. That might run a close race with inexpensiveness for building one specifically for mobile. So you might be asking yourself, well, what about apps? How do apps fit in here? So in general, an app is quite different from a mobile website in that an app needs to be downloaded in advance. So you'll need to have clients or, lawyers, for instance, who are very bought into what you do and will say, yes, I'm going to download this in advance before I necessarily need it. But once they download it, it's available even online. A mobile website, including an interactive mobile website, is available anytime. You don't need to download it, so it's available instantly as long as you're online. And you can, in general, create a very simple application, a simple mobile app, but you're generally going to need a programmer unless it's super simple, just text information. And we're going to look at some apps which are way more than this simple thing. And so all of the ones that we'll talk a little bit about price points and stuff like that, because they're things that are not going to be easily creatable for these, $100, $200. And just a last in kind of our run of what one can do, you can think about using QR codes. So QR codes are this this fancy barcode-looking thing. Basically, if someone takes a picture of it with a mobile phone, depending on exactly what cell phone and what they've downloaded onto their cell phone, they will often be taken directly to a website. So it's almost like an interactive, like a click here for more information that you can put on a piece of paper. It's entirely free, so there's a bunch of sites that you can go to create and then just copy, download a QR code. So really the only cost of it is the cost of whatever you're printing it on. So the space on the page and the cost of the printing it or putting it wherever you're putting it. So there's not a lot of people, so currently QR codes have some issues in that not that many people know what they are or how to use them, particularly among lower income populations. So it's kind of this trade-off between, well, it doesn't cost me anything and it might be useful to somebody, balanced against this idea of, well, the majority of people seeing this will either not know what to do with it or not bother to do it. So it's kind of unclear at the moment what the actual return is on doing project with QR codes. So let's dive into some of the great case studies for you. Liz, let me turn it over to you to talk a little bit about Montana LawHelp and then the mobile LawHelp platform.
Great, thanks, Laura. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about a project that Pro Bono Net partnered with Montana Legal Services Association on the LawHelp platform, and then I'll talk about a couple of other mobile projects that we're involved with that are coming down the pike. So the first one, and we can go to the next slide, is the LawHelp mobile platform, and this was developed thanks to LSC TIG funding to Montana Legal Services Association, and the project partners on this effort were the Colorado Legal Services, Northwest Justice Project, and Pro Bono Net. And you can access the site I'm about to talk about by going to m.montanalawhelp.org, just with that M mobile prefix in front of it. And this platform will be available to all LawHelp partners by the end of 2012. And the overall goal of this project was to increase access to Montana LawHelp's self-help and referral information for the growing number of low-income individuals accessing the internet and looking for online self-help and legal resources through mobile devices, and to help provide more support in some of the geographic challenges that are particular to a rural environment where, as I mentioned earlier, people may be away from their computers for long periods of time or simply may not have traditional desktop access to the internet at home and may rely on their mobile device as their primary connection. So on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about how this works. So the platform is created in HTML5. It's not a downloadable app. It doesn't require users go out to an app store or download an app. It is a mobile website, and it was created in the HTML5 development framework, which is quickly becoming one of the prevailing standards for the mobile web. And it has a mobile-specific interface, and there are a couple of screenshots here. And the way it works from a content perspective is that Montana LawHelp or other LawHelp administrators can use tagging mechanisms within the main LawHelp site to designate existing resources for display on the mobile site where they're written and formatted in such a way that they would work well on a small screen, or they can create mobile-specific alternate versions of resources and tag those for display on the mobile site. So where there's maybe a complex or lengthy booklet, a LawHelp administrator could create a much more compact version of that and then tag that for the mobile site. And then the LawHelp API feed connects the content that's been tagged for the mobile site with the actual mobile platform. So if a resource is modified or removed from the main LawHelp site, those changes can happen simultaneously on the mobile site as well. And the site supports up to 3 channels of content, and by channels we mean different categories of content. So one might be self-help information and forms, the other might be referral information, a third might be court information or information about clinics available. And items that are published to the mobile site can be location-specific. So a LawHelp admin could configure the site such that users would need to enter their zip code and get location-specific results before they see the listing of referral information, for example, or the listing of clinics that are available. So the site is now live in Montana. It's been live for about 3 or 4 months. And as I mentioned, we'll be beginning to support other LawHelp states and coming online later this year. But a few things we learned that I think are relevant and maybe helpful across all mobile website projects. One, we really benefited from learning from those who have gone before us, and in particular, Gwen Daniels, Kathleen Caldwell, and Hugh Calkins were very gracious and helpful in the early stages of this project in sharing what they had learned on Pine Tree and Illinois mobile projects, both around the technical approach, how they approached user testing, and their content strategy. And so that really helped us, I think, hit the ground running and know what obstacles to avoid or what things we should make sure to do in our development and testing process. And then we chose HTML5 as the development framework for several reasons, but one is that it works well across a range of operating systems. So it provides a consistent user experience, whether somebody's using an iPhone or an Android phone or some other type of phone. So it really helped dramatically reduce cross-platform issues that I think can be really challenging in mobile development, and hopefully will make it easier to maintain in the long run because of that. And then if you're new to mobile, allow extra time for development. If you need to identify a contract developer, sometimes that can take a while. I think there's a lot of demand for that skill set out there right now, so it can take a while to identify a good match for your project, and then more time for testing. We did 2 rounds of user testing, both of which were incredibly valuable, but wanted to build in time to be able to make iterative improvements to the site within that, and look at how the testing came back in the second round. And then I think we also learned, and kind of knew this going into the beginning, but the project reinforced it, that it's really important to have a content strategy that is specific to mobile. So within the LawHelp network, some sites have hundreds of self-help resources, and that volume of resources might be overwhelming on a mobile device, and then often there are types of resources or formats of resources that just wouldn't work well on a small screen. They're just not optimized for reading on a phone. So we found that it's really important to identify and prioritize a subset of content that is most relevant and helpful for on-the-go situations. And that process can take time and resources. And then there are lots of reasons to love plain language, but it's especially important on mobile. And plain language principles for writing and design are even more important on a small screen. And since the beginning of Montana LawHelp, when it was first launched way back in 2003, MLSA really emphasized creating content that it adheres to best practices for usability and readability. And I think that was a real strength for the mobile project, and allowed them to more easily adapt or identify content that would work well on the mobile site. And then the last thing I'll mention was a suggestion, I think, from one of the partners along the way when we were developing the site, was to include an email this feature, so that if users didn't want to read the entirety of a piece of content on the mobile site, or wanted to have it easily referenced for later or send to a friend, we built in a feature that allows them to send a link back to that resource to themselves or a friend or an advocate by email, and have had some positive feedback around that feature specifically. So, and here's some of the feedback that we got in the user testing, some direct quotes from users. And overall, the testing reinforced that users really like simplicity on mobile devices, both in the content and then in the design. So in general, users like seeing all of the navigation options, or kind of primary navigation options at once, and that gave them a sense of what's on the site and maybe helped save them from going down the wrong path. One of the other things we learned was that short descriptive headings are especially important on mobile devices, and there were some places on the home page and then some navigation elements where we had to really think through, okay, we only have space for 2 or 3 words there. What's the most helpful information to provide in that heading, so the user knows what to expect or what option will be most important. And then we did have a couple users who actually commented specifically on the availability of videos or links out to videos that are posted on YouTube or other sites, and that they really liked being able to watch that on their phone. That might depend on the user's phone and whether they can easily play a video on it, or what their service plan is, but that was interesting feedback to hear as well. And then looking ahead in terms of what's next for this particular project, the Legal Assistance of Western New York received a TAKE grant for this coming year to add Spanish navigation and Spanish mirror site capability to the mobile platform, and we'll be partnering with the LawHelp New York project and Pro Bono Net on that. And that will also integrate LawHelp capability. So interestingly, there was one of the users in the Montana user testing specifically mentioned that live chat capability would be helpful on a mobile device. And that's something we've looked into in a mobile context, it works a little bit more like sort of text messaging or IM than a traditional chat feature, but the chat platform that is used for the LawHelp projects, LivePerson does support that. So we're excited to be able to integrate that capability under this TIG grant to New York. And then a couple of other user suggestions that might just be helpful for others considering mobile projects. A couple of users suggested adding a search engine to the mobile site, and then icons, graphical icons indicating what format a resource was in, whether that was a link out to a website or a link to a PDF or an HTML resource, that having those graphical indicators would help them know what they were about to open or click on before they got there, and then a map feature, so that if a user was looking at where the Missoula office for Montana Legal Services Association is located, they could easily click on a map or click on a link that integrates with the map feature on their phone to pull that up. So those are some suggestions that might just be helpful across other kinds of mobile web projects for folks to think about. And then a couple of other, outside of this LawHelp project, a couple of other mobile-related projects to keep an eye on. The Georgia Legal Services Program also received a TIG grant for this coming year in partnership with the Northwest Justice Project, LawHelp New York, and Illinois Legal Aid Online to pilot the delivery of legal information and referral information from statewide websites to users through SMS, also known as text messaging. So Pro Bono Net will be working on this as well, and we're really excited about the opportunity to pilot, I think, what has been a really successful information delivery mechanism in other sectors like the health sector, but to pilot that in legal aid and drawing on content and referral information that's already maintained and available through statewide websites. And then Legal Aid Services of Northeastern Minnesota will be working on a TIG grant to develop a set of mobile-optimized settlement checklists and client interview guides that will be accessible to pro bono attorneys or advocates in on-the-go settings like courthouses, and that will be developed on the ProJustice MN Pro Bono Net framework. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about a project I mentioned on a NTAP webinar about a year ago that is coming to fruition this fall. And this is a mobile app, so not a mobile website, but actually a downloadable mobile app that is being developed by Citizenship Works and the Immigration Advocate Network, a project that Pro Bono Net is a partner on, and my colleague Matthew Burnett and Tony Liu staff. And the Citizenship Works site provides interactive tools to help low-income immigrants understand the naturalization process and answer questions about their eligibility for naturalization. And the Immigration Advocates Network is in the process of developing a mobile app that will provide access to several elements of that site, including an immigration legal services directory, what we're calling calculators that will help people determine critical aspects of their eligibility, such as how many days they've spent outside of the country in the last 3 or 5 years. The mobile app will also include a customizable checklist of documents that a user would need to complete the naturalization application, so they can go to a legal services appointment or workshop prepared with those documents, and then QA tests to help the user understand and prepare for the civics and English tests. And that app will be available for Android in November, so in about a month, and then for iOS by the end of the year, and will be available in both English and Spanish versions.
Perfect. Liz, can you talk a little bit about the costs and the time involved in something like Citizen Works? Citizenship Works, this seems like something that's certainly not somebody's in the back room doing it in their spare time, but rather a fairly large funded project, yeah?
Yeah, it is, exactly. Citizenship Works and the Immigration Advocates Network contracted with a mobile developer to develop this app. I actually don't have the cost information handy, but could certainly pass that along or connect people with Matthew and Tony who are interested. But it has been a pretty significant development effort. I think that the scoping for it started earlier this year. They have worked with a graphic designer who focuses much of his work on mobile design projects, and you can get a sense of that from some of the screens here. So it involved engaging with an Android developer, an iOS developer, and then a mobile-specific designer. So it's been, I think, about a 10 or 12-month project to bring it online.
Terrific.
So is,
Great.
Any of the other projects that you've mentioned, is there any of those that you could scope with a budget?
I should mention, I guess, one thing about the SMS platform that we're looking at for the project with Georgia Legal Services Program, and we'll have to do some more analysis on this, but we're actually looking at a vendor called Mobile Commons, which is a vendor that Citizenship Works also has used for an SMS campaign. And they have essentially a monthly rate that's based on the volume of text messages being sent and what aspects of their platform that you're using. And I think that rate ranges, I'm going to say, somewhere from about maybe $800 to about $1,500 a month. So it's pretty significant. But that's one of the reasons why I think this project, and you can have multiple states. So for this SMS campaign, there's going to be 4 states pooling resources and using the same platform for it, much in the way that we've done with the LawHelp Live Person platform. And what's also, I think, nice about the Mobile Commons platform is the statewide website's APIs can integrate with it. So as referral information gets updated, say, on Washington LawHelp or Illinois Legal Aid Online, that information automatically can be updated in the text messages that are being sent out.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
So, and I think that we've looked at 2 different things here. So we've looked at a mobile website, which was the LawHelp, and now we've looked at an app. We're going to look at another app for staff. The SMS stuff that Liz is talking about, we're actually going to look at in considerably more detail in just a second. So we're pulling out in this section kind of ways to present kind of a broadcast information, and we pulled broadcast text into the next section because you can also have interactive texts. But let's, we want to turn to Vince, and I'm going to make you the presenter, and you can share your own desktop. So Vince is going to talk about another mobile app that's designed specifically for lawyers. So as opposed to having it be the end client, to have something that lawyers can use.
We've also got a quick question here while we do the transition, which is why would you choose to use Android, iOS, etc., when you can do things in HTML5? My quick answer on that would be that with Android or iOS, an app that you can download, I mean, it really hits a different user group than HTML5, because HTML5, they're going to have continuous access to the internet and be able to send things back and forth. Any of the downloadable apps, they're not necessarily going to be continually connected to use it and can use it while they're offline.
So I think that the 2 projects that Liz has presented are actually really good examples of different audiences. So for LawHelp, it likely wouldn't be as effective to have that be an app, because people who immediately need help are not going to, download. They're not going to have it downloaded in advance. However, someone who's thinking about citizenship is pretty invested in that project, one would imagine, that process, And so asking them to download an app is not really a big deal at all in the great scheme of things, and then they can have it with them wherever they go. So it's kind of a matter of, is your audience going to be invested in downloading? If so, you can do somewhat more things with a mobile app than you can easily do via HTML5. But if they're not going to be invested to download, and don't overestimate how many people will be invested to download, then it's probably better to do a website through something like HTML5.
And Tony also makes a really good point here. He's one of the developers who's working on the CitizenWorks site, or not site, app, is that they're targeting Android specifically because the Android phones tend to be lower cost and are targeted at immigrant communities, so there's a lower buy-in than on the Apple operating platform. So it's definitely related to the demographics that they're working with.
Terrific. Great. And let's turn to Vince and iPro Bono.
Great. Cool new tool. It looks like there's an audience view, and you can see if everybody's 100% viewing it. So I'm going to assume that y'all can see the iPro Bono app screen.
Yep.
And unlike all the previous presenters that were so thoughtful in their execution, not unlike most of my work, we just jumped in and learned as we went. We did develop a native app to iOS, so it's an Apple-only product right now. It was kind of before, it's been going on for about a year and a half, maybe a little bit longer than that. So it was before the clarity of HTML5 and jQuery really hit me. However, we did it old school, and we came up with iPro Bono. And ours is really different. It's not a focus on necessarily pro se materials, but it's more of a connecting cases with pro bono attorneys. So I'm just going to briefly describe some of the functionality of the app, and then more importantly, speak to some of the benefits and the challenges and unsuspected or unexpected benefits and challenges. So I don't know if anyone has downloaded this app yet. Wondering real quick while I can. There we go. The first thing to keep in mind, and I think Liz might have spoke to this, is it really is an extension of our website, our statewide website, and it's an outgrowth of pre-existing technology. So it pulls XML feeds from our website, and it really replicates, it just extends it, what we were already doing. We created online case selection for pro bono attorneys. It was not interactive, just if you like this case, if you're logged in behind password protected and you see a case that you like, you can click an email and email the coordinator. But in 2005, that was kind of forefront, and then we switched it, made it a little more interactive using Drupal and open source technology to where it was pulling from a database but never merged with the case management system. So what we were doing here with this app was really just extending technology and content that we were already gathering and creating and putting it into another arena that we thought attorneys might like. We call it pro bono in your pocket, nice little tagline. And again, just trying to get cases connected with pro bono attorneys. The e-newsletter goes out monthly, and it's been just really successful, and we've got a lot of hits, just a lot of good case placement. So we wanted to see what that would look like in the mobile arena. So there we go. So again, just we're pulling content from our website and getting it there. So it's pre-existing content. We didn't want to create new content, right? So the way it works is the username password is based off the same username password for the website, so we're not dealing with any type of other authentication issues. So if you're registered for the website, then you can be registered for the app. Again, this is for advocates, pro bono attorneys, and other type of volunteers, so there's not an issue with that. But we can still keep somewhat of a confidential nature about it. We don't put very specific facts in our case descriptions. But so again, trying to consolidate, replicate without replicating more tasks, right? So Just a couple of screenshots. You can see that we have news feeds pulling in from our website. These news feeds also go into what we call our justice news. So it's not just setting up cases, but also just getting word out about us, getting more contact and involvement. So again, not replicating content, pulling it in, pretty standard and easy. These are just some screenshots about support help, how the app works. These are all things that most application development, like whether you're Android or Apple, will demand. They want to see support, who made it, things like that. And we'll get into development info here in a minute. You'll see that down here it's Logic Current. Really interesting story about how we came about developing this. Let's see. Again, just more support information. And then we get into the actual heart of the app, and these are cases. We want cases by county and by substantive law type. So the user can simply, they can query by case type or county, or they can just scroll through and see what's underneath the substantive law category that we created. And when they see one they like, they'll just click it. And then just pull down and refresh, kind of dragging thing. When they click it, they see the, okay, here's the description of the case, case type, case number, everything they need to know about it. So they say, I want this case. We actually, this is a screenshot from a little earlier version. Now we say, I'm interested in this case. Testing kind of made that too much of a commitment. So I'm interested in this case. What will happen is an email is generated. So for any reason they didn't put an email in their profile, this will pop up. And that's how they put it in, with a phone number. So that phone number will be sent to, along with the, so what happens is the coordinator receives an email with their profile information saying this attorney, Joe Pro Bono, would like this case. So that coordinator then has the email, the case number, case description, and their phone number. A thank you pops up. And if you'll see bullet number 3 here, email is delayed 15 minutes. That was one of my ideas. I call it the drunk man delay, because you're sitting wearing a bar and it's like, oh, I'm going to take this case. But the 15-minute, just to allow the user to feel a little more free to click through to finding more information about the case, and then they can decline it within 15 minutes before it hits the coordinator. So high-tech stuff here, the drunk man trigger. Once a case is in use, once they selected it, then they get their, the user is notified, of course, back that they had it, although they're the ones that selected it, so they would know, but an email is generated. And then we can see an email generation screenshot here. And then they have a little thing called My Cases, which is kind of like My Documents, so they can keep a list of all the cases that they have, and click through it if they need to know the name or anything. And that's also a good record for just reporting pro bono hours, which we're looking to in the next version to have a simple little form to where they can report straight from their phone, as well as a nice little time keeper system, so they can hit time when they're on that case, and that could feed through it too. So they could actually report on the case, the outcome, the hours, etc. from the phone. Here we go. They could also delete if they just took way too many cases, that drunk man in the bar maybe. And then just talking about some of the benefits, I didn't want to get too screenshotty and technical there. But for us, again, we just kind of jumped in head first, not thinking it quite as through as some of y'all, just wanting to do it. And our primary benefits that we've seen actually was not what we expected. We haven't had a ton of case placement. We still get most case placement insofar as technology is concerned through our monthly e-newsletter and by advocates going online. But we have had a lot of downloads. Well, a lot, I guess, is variable. But here in Arkansas, I don't have an exact number because unfortunately Apple kind of wipes, kind of like live chat stats. You can only go back so far, and you can only go back, I think, 6 months. But we had about 150 in the past 6 months, and I know when we launched that there was several hundred then. So for Arkansas, that's pretty good insofar as downloads. But although we didn't see like a huge increase in pro bono case placement through the app, we did see a lot of excitement about it. Arkansas was kind of one of the first to develop an app like this, so we got a lot of publicity and a lot of interest in how it can be used for other things. And so social media, of course, came up as a big thing. We haven't implemented it completely. We do have it now where a notice will come up on the Facebook page. I guess I don't have a screenshot that says a case has been taken, access to justice in a certain county, yay. We haven't connected the attorney to that yet because there's just some issues that we felt weird about. But all the technology is in place, so we can hit our page or their page if they allow us to. We have a built-in Facebook app there that would say Joe Pro Bono took the case, and give, or their firm, or however they would like to use that to their benefit. So in the Facebook pages, we definitely got a high increase of volume of people responding to posts and signing up and liking due to the app, which is a great another vehicle to get information out to the pro bono community and recruit events and things like that. And I'm not sure what that is. So and then we got a lot of good kind of national. It's a great blog that did some good stuff. We got some TV, we got some radio, a lot of different blogs. Kimbrough, my hero, yay. So, and even some local TV spots and a fair amount of radio interviews. So all that, ultimately you want to help the client. So if you're not placing cases, I don't know, we could look at it as kind of like, it's just another tool, it's not successful. But I think there's been a lot of excitement around it. And going forward, there's another shout out, yay, LSC, and just some more publicity. Again, Facebook, a little analytical tool too to see, that wasn't a great day, but how many people are talking about something, and just so helpful and so in your face as the admin of that page. You can check out what's going on. Twitter as well. But looking into the future and how we're planning to use it, I've talked about some of the rollouts we're going to do, technically speaking. But what on the fourth bullet there, thing I'm kind of most excited about is beyond legal aid. And if you'll notice the screenshot, it didn't say Legal Aid of Arkansas or any of that. I chose to go through our Access to Justice Commission, which isn't LSC restricted, and also they had money to pay for the license, which I think was $99. So we're using it now to, one of the commissioners call it the eHarmony approach, but we're looking with mediators now and things that might be that kind of touch the justice gap that aren't necessarily qualifying for clients due to priority or for whatever reason, or just simple volunteer events that would never be listed as pro bono. We're starting to use it for that and just try to think how we can integrate it into more different situations. So I like that. I'm glad we chose to go with the commission. Plus they can pay for all the updates, right? But speaking of updates, oh, I didn't finish this, man. I was going to give you the information for our developer. He's a really good guy. He's a friend of mine. He was one of those guys who went to law school, and then he was a programmer beforehand and realized he could make more money programming, so never practiced law, but really wanted to contribute. So he donated about 500 hours plus, really, to build this app, again, in the native environment for Apple. And he loved it as an alternative way to do pro bono. He's never been in court, didn't want to do it, and he wanted to work with me. So I did all the website, XML end, and what graphics we have, the graphic end. And so it was iPro Bono built by pro bono, which I think is amazing. So, what we spent on it was, I think, $99 for the license, and then, I don't know, I think we paid lunch for him once. So, so that's about, I think I still owe him a beer, but that's how we came about it, and I really wanted to build it that way. I wanted to build it pro bono. So I didn't do all the hardcore programming at all. I just set up everything on this end to feed properly, and was just the kind of thought generator person. So so that's kind of it in a nutshell. Would you like me to address anything specific maybe, or?
We've got a question from Lewis. Lewis is asking whether you have any stats on results. So are you able to track things like the number of attorneys that are using it, the cases placed through the tools, things like that?
Yeah, we are, and well, I don't have all the downloads, unfortunately. I thought I could capture all of them, so I could only capture for like the last 6 months. So insofar as downloads, it's going to be a guess, or hopefully our developer has captured those previously when we launched, because we've been launched now, I think, over a year, and but in the past 6 months, it's just a little under 100, I believe, is the number of downloads. That doesn't mean everybody's using it, though, or that everybody who's downloaded is necessarily a pro bono attorney. Of course, if you're using it, you do have to be a registered member. And the case placement within a year is right at a dozen, which is sad. So I thought it was kind of a failure. But again, it's been a vehicle to expand usage of the website. I've noticed a lot more interest in news feeds, push to Facebook. So I think it was worth doing, especially since I didn't have to do the 500 hours of programming, right? But looking at it, if I had to pay for it, then I would have went a different route for sure, and did something different. So the stats that I do have currently don't look good on the app end, but what's looking better is like Facebook increases. It's been maybe 400% since the launch. It's a lot of interest surrounding that and the other technologies. So I think just surrounding that, and publicity is not for publicity's sake. I mean, it's good to talk about just pro bono and get on the news for anything and get more pro bono signups. We have seen recruitment increase a lot just generally, and you can link through it to recruit. So website stats are up, to answer the question. Facebook, social media stats is up, and I think it's really due to this. But insofar as case placement, pretty poor, just to be honest.
Great. Terrific. So just kind of to summarize we're wrapping up now with the idea of providing information. So we've looked at the idea of tweaking your current website, building a new website like the LawHelp website, building an app. So Tony has actually put another really useful comment about one reason you might build an app as opposed to a website is that if you need things that are going to be responsive, like for instance the Citizen Works flashcards, HTML5 is not as responsive on current hardware. So if you think about it, like you have, like an iPhone does all of these fun touch things where you can zoom in, zoom out, stuff like that. It'll respond. It's very interactive. If you build simply a website as opposed to, an HTML5 website as opposed to an app, you're not going to have as much ability to do that. Let us, just for the sake of time, let's, hang on a second, I'm switching over to, switching over to my desktop. Let's go on to talk about conversations with constituents and walk through a little bit of what that might mean and some case studies in that area, and then we'll come back around to talk about how these things might work together. So in the realm of conversations with constituents, Liz mentioned a little bit the idea of text messaging. And I just wanted to walk through, if you wanted to do text messaging, what are some of the ways that you can do that? So the idea of, I want to send a broadcast text to either one or a number of people. The first way that one can do that is simply to send literally a text via your email. So you can email, phone number at provider. Like, for instance, this, I believe, was the actual cell number of one of our interns at one point. So 207-928, this is just our phone number at whatever the provider is, Verizon.com. So this is not officially supported, so you probably shouldn't be doing it for thousands of people, but just to, for instance, remind a client that they have an appointment with an attorney, like when you might otherwise make a phone call or make a send an email, it can be a really interesting thing there for someone who doesn't have as much access to those other technologies. You can also use, you can broadcast text. So if you have phone numbers, you can send broadcast text in a very similar way to broadcast email. So for instance, this we're looking at here is just rock the vote, reminding us to go vote on November 4th. How do you get phone numbers? You generally would either simply ask people for it. So you ask for it on an intake form, you ask for it in kind of an online subscription. If you have a large event where somebody is like speaking from a podium, for instance, you could potentially get folks like lawyers, for instance, to subscribe by texting a particular keyword to a particular short code. I'm sorry, a short code to a keyword, yes, a keyword to a short code. So water being the keyword here, and 87878 to be the short code. So where does that come from? Gone in a different direction. Where does that come from? So you would use a vendor. So Liz was talking about Mobile Accord. They are one of a number of vendors, and we'll talk through a couple of those vendors in just a second. So you can also do more than just broadcast text. You can have two-way conversation. So you can set up either manual, so you can either just sit there on the other side of the line and text back. So for instance, we'll talk a little later about a case study of a suicide hotline done entirely through text. So you could have just someone at the other end texting back. Or you can set it up to be automated, where someone, for instance, can say, you know, all right, so if you want to help, text help to this short code. They text help. You then answer, can you volunteer this Saturday from 1 to 4? They respond, yes. You know, and you respond automatically, great, we'll see you. You can also imagine this in the case of providing information that you're looking, so someone is looking for information about, you know, self-representation for a particular type of case, that you could essentially have an automated tree that was going to do that. If you're going down that road, you might well want to not like just hand type that all in, but actually provide it from a database. Liz mentioned the idea of tying it in to an API, so to be able to pull information from your other law information and have that be available through text. So here's an example from the Blue Ocean Institute, where if I simply text fish halibut to a certain phone number, it's going to send me back environmental concerns about the about halibut. So, and you can easily imagine this in a legal aid context, that people are texting particular questions, looking for particular information that could be parsed by keyword to provide them with information. You also, this has less immediate obvious ramifications to the legal aid sector, but you can also go the other way around. You can ask people to report incidents via text, and you then collect them into a database. So you can have people, so this might be like if you were doing a, you know, a large suit or something like that, you could say, hey, if you've had this issue, if you're having trouble with your water quality, please text us. And we could create a map of that thing. So what we're actually looking at is a map of incidents in Haiti around the Haiti earthquake. So if you want to send texts, some lower cost options for doing that. Moses is kind of the old man of this group, so no pun intended. It's been around for like 10 years, which is kind of crazy that makes you the old man. So very basic broadcast texting. So basically to say, I would like to text this amount, this piece of information to these 100 people for $10 a month. So very inexpensive, but it doesn't do much of the fancy stuff that I was talking about. There is higher price points. They were not keen to talk to us at Idealware about those price points. I suspect they'd be happier to talk to you individually. There's also mobile cause, which is up to 1,000 texts per month, starting at $70 a month. So also not super expensive compared to the options we're about to look at. but also reasonably limited in terms of the amount of, automatic responses or pulling things out of a database. So Liz mentioned Mobile Accord. Mobile Commons is another one that's in that same realm. Easy to use, sophisticated stuff, so all of kind of the fanciness that I was talking about. It starts about $400 a month and goes well higher, as Liz mentioned, up to $1,500 or $2,000 a month. Very full-featured, and they tend not to have, as Liz mentioned, a lot of caps on exactly what you're doing with it. So there's partnership opportunities for multiple people to use it at once. If you have more technical capabilities, something like Click-a-Tell there's no actual interface for someone like me to send a text. But you can hook it up against the database to automatically send texts or to understand texts and to send things back out. So that is, it's priced by the text. So it's a little more affordable at the lower end of the spectrum. So if you're only sending a couple hundred texts a month, it will be considerably less expensive than Mobile Accord or Mobile Commons. So let's talk about a couple of people who are using text messaging for their own purposes. Kate, you want to take just 2 or 3 minutes to talk about Citizenship Works?
Yep, and this is, again, sort of Liz mentioned Citizenship Works previously, that they are sort of the organization that helps low-income immigrants find ways to become citizens, and that they, well, their app is coming out this fall, that they have been doing an SMS campaign for quite some time, where it's simply just texting your address or zip code to, find help near you. As you can see in the message there, that they have sort of, you can also sort of a link to their website, that this is an example on the screen that I did, where you simply send the word citizenship to 877-877. They also have it available so that you can send the word citizenship in Spanish, so that you can get information in both languages. And then they just give you that, it doesn't have the response here, but it gave me a organization located here in Baltimore that I could connect with if I had questions. So a really sort of simple example of connecting people with resources over text messaging.
Fabulous. Thanks, Kate. And Carolyn asks, do you also have to have a cell phone account for all this texting? So do you need to pay Verizon or AT&T? So no, the services that we've just talked through, some from Moses to Mobile Accord, all of that, they have the relationships with the cell services, so you don't actually have to have one yourself. There are services you might have heard of, things like Frontline is one. There's another one whose name I can't immediately remember, where you send out the text off your own cell phone plan. They're very widely used in the developing world, but in the United States, they're likely to get yourself blacklisted. So if you're sending out hundreds of texts from just your own account, regardless of what tool you're using, the plans are really unhappy about it, and you're likely to get your account shut down.
Oh, one other point on that, your end user, your targeted user, although they need a cell number, they often, to receive text, don't actually need a cell phone. Google Voice numbers, which are free, receive text messages at no cost, and they don't even need a cell phone. So I know several people who will check those via internet access or internet cafes on iPads or laptops, because the cost of text messaging is zero compared to $40 a month or a few cents per message.
And so you actually have the other way around as well, that you can use Google Voice to actually send a text message. So as opposed to, like, for instance, sending out the one via email, as I mentioned before, Google Voice is going to be a little more reliable email if you're only sending them out a reliable service if you're only sending them out one at a time. Terrific. So let's look at another quick case study here. So we talked about the idea of simply having somebody on the other end of the texting. So to say, all right, text to this phone number your legal issue, and somebody will help you. Here's an example of, this is an organization in Minnesota that provides a suicide prevention hotline via text message. So I know this sounds a little nuts, that you are basically now attempting to do suicide counseling in 140 characters or less, but they have found it to be incredibly successful in getting people to actually reach out. They get 30 times as many texts as they did phone calls, and this costs them nothing other than the promotion and, you know, a cell phone plan to be able to actually respond to this. Presumably a little bit of training to try to figure out how you can effectively counsel in 140 characters. So it's really an interesting method for providing at least small chunks of information, and simply people are here, people are using text, so they will reach out. Lisa asks if we could repeat about the non-phone number audio. Yes, actually, hang on just a second. I will post some thoughts into the text. While Kate talks a little bit through a case study on a program called Rate Your Ride in Baltimore, which is kind of a lot of different things coming together.
So Rate Your Ride is a program based out of the Maryland Transportation Association, and that they the transportation in Maryland was really created with the idea of keeping people where they are at, that it's not particularly effective at moving people around. And I think, like in many other urban areas, that there are a lot of people who are dissatisfied with the options that they have. And in Maryland, that you have the option of participating and rating your ride. And for a long time that they had a sort of different ways of doing that, but the biggest piece that they've been working on is using text messaging to allow people to be there at the bus stop, and that the bus is late or passes them by for whatever reason, and being able to report on that. This project actually ends up being an advocacy project working with a local organization called Wide Angle Youth Media, because they hear in Baltimore that students at the public schools ride public buses and public transportation to get to schools, and that often this is a barrier for them in terms of attendance. And so there's a group, the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance, that has come together to really work in getting students to do more rating your ride, so that they can change up the system so that it's more useful for students, and so that they're able to get to school more. On the next slide, that I think that there are a few examples.
Yes, sorry.
Laura. So you can see here sort of the example of Rate Your Ride, and that you can see that 95% of the respondents that were students answered by text, but not as many of the people going to work. On the next slide, that we have sort of some example based on out of this sort of text message information that came back, that the students at Wide Angle Youth Media actually designed some infographics to be able to educate the MTA about sort of what this data said and sort of what routes were particular problems, looking at generally sort of mostly the student data, because that's what they were interested in, and that in this case you can see that for a student, that if your bus is late 63% of the time, that's likely going to make you late to school as well. A big piece about this is that I think legal aids could use it for sort of similar campaigns and gathering information, potentially around consumer issues or housing issues. It might be something in terms of if you know that there's a particular court where people are having problems there, working with the courts to do sort of a Rate Your Experience program may provide a way to make the court experience better for people and get some actual responses. One of the nice things about this is that on the other end that you do gather a little bit of additional data that I think, depending on your provider, that you may still have access to that phone number. I know that for many of the things, when you sign up for social, not for SMS messages, that you get sort of subscribed to a list, and that you can choose to stop, but you still have, unlike a website or sort of a mobile app, that in some ways that you have more connection with that person, where you could do a follow-up survey or something along those lines. This project is actually built on a project called Tropo, T-R-O-P-O, that allows they used a developer to combine sort of this text messaging service along with an online survey, and then a phone survey as well, so that people could interact over the phone with the survey without having to have sort of a text messaging plan if they didn't have it. So that is the Rate Your Ride campaign.
Great, thank you. And I'd love to kind of engage our panelists here. So Vince, Kate, Liz, would love to hear your thoughts. Carolyn is asking, I would love to hear more about the extent to which people can use SMS to communicate answers to legal questions. It seems like even short answers would be really long to put in there. What types of things, I could imagine certainly, at least at a minimum, kind of basic scheduling type things, that someone says, I have an issue, when can I come in? What other things could you imagine? If we had some kind of legal text helpline, what type of information could be provided in such a medium?
Well, I think links to resources on the LawHelp site would definitely fit inside that area. But also just very basic questions can often be distilled down to that short area. I think it's a matter of getting out of the lawyer precise arcane language and working on that plain language that was emphasized earlier on in the presentation for that shorter format.
Yeah, certainly you can imagine a lot of people asking yes or no questions to which you could answer yes, no, or it depends on a lot of factors, please schedule an appointment, all of which would fit into 140 characters.
Yeah, I think that the branching logic that is capable using some of the more sophisticated SMS platforms can be really helpful in this area as well. So, providing short snippets of information or a link back to a resource on a website, like Brian mentioned. But you could also ask the person, set up a branching logic to ask whether they'd be interested in learning about a workshop or a clinic happening in their area, and then have them type in their zip code to get information about when that next clinic is happening. So I think in particular, sort of the referral and opportunities for people to come to clinics or workshops or access direct services can be effective in an SMS medium.
And Carolyn asked another great question. Should we be concerned about the cost of many texts to our users, or are we assuming that they have unlimited plans? In fact, I spoke to the Rate Your Ride people in Baltimore, and they had actually surveyed people to find out the answer to that very question, and they found out, at least among their high school demographic, nearly all of them, over 90% of them, had unlimited text plans. So there certainly are many people these days who have unlimited text plans. It probably wouldn't hurt to take a look at your own demographics, but it's certainly not undoable.
Yeah, Laura, I think that as the audience gets younger, that texting is so ingrained that it often costs a whole lot less to have an unlimited plan than to put up with the overages that you're likely to see. That I was a part of a presentation recently around someone talking about mobile and talking about how sort of his wisest choice for his teenager was the fact that he put her on an unlimited plan because she sends somewhere around 3,000 text messages a month. That for for students and those who are younger, that it's a very just natural piece for them to have this conversation going on continually while they're doing other things.
Right, and the free Google Voice users are also essentially on an unlimited plan for no cost.
Great. So Steve mentions that he just checked the Moses website and they list $90 as their cheapest plan. I checked in with them about a month ago, and they were still offering this not very advertised plan for $10 for a very minimal services. I suspect that $90 plan is for considerably more services. That's probably, so if you want something for a reasonable size list, so Steve is saying he's interested in more information on low-cost options to conduct an SMS issue campaign, so I'm interpreting that as a broadcast kind of outreach. You're probably talking about reasonably at least $50 or $100 a month to be able to get what you need in that area. So it's not likely to be an incredibly cheap prospect to take on, but not, incredibly expensive either. Fabulous. So I'm going to just do about maybe a 5-minute tour through our third topic here, which I suspect is slightly, that people are, I think, a little more thinking about this already. I think it'll be slightly less new to most of the folks on the phone. So I'm going to go through it fairly quickly, and then we'll turn back around and take more questions or have more discussion as to what people are doing. So there's this whole other area of how you could use mobile phones to support programs, and that's by using them to let your staff have more access to things. So for instance, to allow staff in the field to be able to access their case management system via a BlackBerry, via a tablet. This primarily, from a practical perspective, this is primarily looking for systems, looking for a case management system or a constituent relationship management system that actually has these interfaces. So it's not incredibly practical on most people's budgets to be able to actually create an interface for staff to use the system over the phone off their own budget. So this is more of a feature to look for than something to build. Also potentially to allow them to enter data. So if you have staff who mostly work in the field, it can save huge amounts of time and money potentially to ask them to enter data remotely, as opposed to sending in forms, trying to come to the office solely to do data entry, to have somebody who is responsible for doing data entry. So if there's just a little bit of information, this is actually something you could potentially build. So just kind of a little interface, potentially something that's actually just a web form that they could enter data from on a smartphone or on a tablet, and would go directly into a database. You could also use it to collect data from constituents, so from lawyers who come in, from clients. They can be a great way to have kind of quick data collection, especially because a lot of people are really happy to play with an iPad, an iPad, if it means like, okay, yeah, I'll take your survey if it means I get to fiddle with your iPad for a little bit. So that can also be an interesting way simply to collect data. Then you can also think about the possibilities of using particularly a tablet to interact with people. So for instance, what if you have a deaf client or a client who speaks another language? Is there the possibility of having some kind of interface that would allow at least some minimal interaction, to have some kind of tree of services or answers or something that would allow you to communicate with people who you might not otherwise communicate with? So just a couple of case studies in this realm. So an organization in Minnesota called Headway Emotional Health Services did a fairly sizable rollout where they provided 50 case managers who are all in the field with smartphones to help them view and enter data in the field. They were mostly using them for scheduling purposes. They could see clients' data, but they were primarily using them to view their own schedule, to rearrange their own schedule, and then to enter a little bit of information up front. So this was not a vast investment, so about $5,000 up front for the phones themselves, and about $1,200 a month for the data plan. And they had a system that already supported mobile access, so that was not an additional cost. They're not directly tracking the impact, but they feel very strongly that it's reduced scheduling conflicts, and staff are saying that, you know, I can do all of this by my phone. I don't need to pull out a laptop. I don't need to go into the office as much. On this particular case study, we also have an awesome quote. Actually, the last piece of this quote that you're not seeing, you know, if I want to get something from my client, I can do all that from my phone too. The last part is, and I can make calls if I want. So I can use my phone to actually call people. Here's a last case study of just the idea of, so this is using iPads in a special education environment, which I think has some interesting applications to using iPads for, as I've mentioned, kind of populations who you're not able to communicate easily in traditional ways. So the Reach School, which is a preschool for kids on the autism spectrum, bought iPads for each of their 7 classrooms. So this was a total investment of about $7,000. There's a lot of special applications that are built for kids on the autism spectrum. So this allows them to have those games, to show videos, just to let kids play a game or something like that as a special treat. So you can kind of imagine this in a, as if you were to give each of your lawyers an iPad, and there were particular iPad applications or applications that would allow them to communicate somewhat with somebody who's spoken another language, something like that. There's some interesting overlap here. And that brings us to the end of our regularly scheduled content here. I'm really interested, actually, so I'm definitely open to your questions, your comments, so anything you want to add through the chat. And then for our panelists, I'd love to kind of hear just some summary thought. Liz, do you have any thoughts of kind of what this might, what this whole world of mobile might mean to a legal aid organization? What some of the biggest opportunities are that you see?
Well, that's a big question, but you know, I think in the different kind of categories of examples that you've shown here, I think the thing that's a couple things that are most exciting to me is the ability to reach users who might otherwise not have access to sort of traditional services, whether that's because of a geographic barrier and their physical location to an office, or a technology barrier where they may not have traditional desktop access and may be using a mobile phone as their primary communication mechanism. So I think the ability to reach new people and kind of leapfrog and bridge traditional gaps in service is really exciting across all of the types of examples you showed.
Absolutely. Brian, anything jump out to you as kind of some really kind of just key opportunities in this space?
Well, I definitely think that a large client population that you might not have traditionally thought has access to this space does, and that definitely comes from our interaction with our Native American unit. They are heavy users of social media and also heavily invested in mobile phones, and I think moving into that space may broaden our ability to reach out to that community specifically.
While we're seeing if anybody has things to offer, any last words as to what seems most exciting and compelling to you?
Well, I have to give a shout out for Richard Zorza's blog post at accesstojustice.net yesterday, that he was doing a review of the latest round of TIG grants and mentioned that it was the year of mobile and gave some ideas around sort of things people should think about. The fact that for a cell phone that it's obviously not just about the, well, for a smartphone it's not just about the phone calls and it's not just about the text messages, but the fact that you have these other capabilities to the fact that you can shake your phone or that the phone can sense movement, and that one of the things that he's talked about is the question of whether there's an opportunity to help domestic violence victims call for help in the midst of a domestic violence sort of crisis, that whether it's a certain sort of movement of the phone or that they, perhaps you're able to sort of understand when if it gets thrown across the room or something like that. But I think that another piece that I'm really personally interested in is wondering if there's some room around gamification and legal education, whether that's for attorneys or for clients. Things like there's Free Rice, which has been a website where you can go and increase your vocabulary, but as a part of every word that you define correctly, that a certain amount of rice is given to a UN development program, I believe, and so you're actually helping to feed people as well. And wondering if there are similar sort of games that can be used to not necessarily make a product, but sort of help people engage in learning more about for an attorney it might be better understanding family law, whereas for a client that it might be just general sort of overall quizzes around the court or something like that, it'll maybe instead of Angry Birds it's Angry Judges. I don't know.
Terrific. Well, thank you all so much for your time. A big shout out to Kate and Liz and Vince for their help. Thank you so much. And let me turn it back over to Brian to do just a quick goodbye and next steps.
Yes, I definitely wanted to remind people that this video will be up on the NTAP YouTube channel, which should be on your screen currently. Also, our training calendar is being updated, and all of the upcoming trainings you should be able to register for about the next 2 months now. So please take a look there, and if you have any suggestions or feedback, please give them to us in the upcoming survey over this, because we'll definitely use that for our next round of webinars next year. So thank you so much.
Terrific. Thank you all so much for your time, and hope to see you next month when we're talking about remote service delivery, and we're actually in the process of collecting a bunch of great case studies right now.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.